Hello, welcome to the Wednesday talks of MURCIR. Today we have a special guest speaker, Professor Cesar Rendueles. He is a professor of sociology from Madrid Complutense University, and also he is a researcher at the Spanish National Research Council. He has PhD degree from Department of Philosophy, Madrid Complutense University. Today, we are planning to discuss the digital age and its impact on changing political landscape. As you know, we are living in a digital age and it changes our social way of conduct and our capacity for communication. So what kind of changes happen and what shall we expect in this new world is a very interesting question. And maybe this is the only one of the questions we are planning to discuss today. I'm sure it will be a very interesting discussion. Thanks for accepting our invitation, dear Professor Cesar Rendueles.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Before we delve into our session, let me to provide a very brief introduction about our esteemed research center. So,
Please.
MURCIR, the Marmara University Research Center for International Relations, has been a pillar of academic excellence for the last 30 years in Istanbul. Thanks to the invaluable contribution of numerous prominent scholars in Turkish academia, it has not only witnessed, but also actively contributed to the evolution of international relations since the end of the Cold War, actually. We encourage all the listeners, followers, our programs to follow also our activities in our social media accounts and also YouTube channel. Your subscriptions and likes play a very important role, as you know, for the promotion of our studies in the next days. So yes, dear Professor, the floor is yours. We are really wondering your comments about this changing digital world. Thank you for accepting our invitation again.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Professor Thual Mertuthuner for her kindness. It's an honor for me to speak to you today, a real honor. I'm delighted. So thank you very much for this invitation. Secondly, I would like to apologize for my awful English, I know. I will do my best, trusting in your hermeneutic clarity, as we say in philosophy. To make it worse, I have the worst spring allergy in medical history, so I'll do my best. No, more seriously, I would like to start my presentation by talking about something that is happening in Spain recently. It is something local. But I think it is related to international changes. So I think it can be a good starting point to introduce what I would like to explain today, to introduce my argument. In recent months in Spain, there have been protests by parents who want to limit or control their children's access to digital technology. A lot of mobilization, a lot of protests. These mobilizations started as agreements or alliances of families committing to delay their children's access to smartphones. They literally propose that families sign a contract promising not give a smartphone to their children. This is the contract. It's in Spanish, but this is the contract. Soon other public demands emerged. So for example, they demanded the banning of smartphones in schools. They demanding the delaying of teenagers' access to social media. They demanded real age control on sensitive online content. These mobilizations began in some affluent neighborhood of Barcelona, but quickly spread across the country through social media and WhatsApp groups, which I suppose it is a bit ironic. Even they spread in other countries like France and UK. This is news about France. The question is, these protests were widely covered in media. The Spanish politicians also reacted very quickly, really very quickly. In just a few months, Pedro Sánchez, Spain's prime minister, warned of the digital epidemic affecting young people. The Ministry of Education create a committee of experts that should design a safe digital environment for children and young people. Even the regional parliament of Madrid set a commission to investigate the problem. These protests against the use of smartphones by children and young people arise from a wide and fuzzy citizen platforms. The demands are ill-defined, and depends on a mixed bag of ideological positions, but they have some point of consensus. The two main are, first, a vision of digital technology as potentially dangerous, and the second is, consequently, the demand for safe technological spaces for children and young people and teenagers. Their diagnosis of digital technology underline the negative impact of smartphones on problems such as bullying, mental illness, child sexual abuse, access to pornography at an early age, school failure, and so on and so on. For me, what is really striking is the scientific and technocratic bias of these social movements, because they are very receptive to the last wave of academic papers warning of the detrimental effect of smartphones on young people. They use that scientific research on this topic as if it were consensual evidence with clear practical implications. But from my point of view, it is not. It is not. There is no scientific consensus about the effect of smartphones in young people. Instead, we have controversial science. Research that throw us into contradictory and confusing practical situations. These movements, this is my point, look to science as an authority to avoid political conflict. They use science as an authority to avoid political discussion. I think this is interesting and symptomatic of something wider, because there is nothing surprising about this tendency. In fact, it is a widespread trend. For example, the banning of digital technologies in school is a global trend. And the reason for that banning is the alleged negative effect of technology in educational outcomes. In fact, this could be seen as a reaction this could be seen as a counter movement to the massive introduction of technology in schools as a kind of educational silver bullet, which has been the norm over the past 20 years, as everybody knows. But the reality is much more complex. We know that the impact of digital technology on education depends on the things like the educational approach, the type of technologies, and a really wide range of social factors. I have a quote of a recent UNESCO report that summarizes the situation as follows. Change resulting from the use of digital technology is incremental, uneven, and bigger in some contexts than others. The application of digital technology varies by community and socioeconomic level, by teacher willingness and preparedness, by education level, and by country income. Nothing surprising, but this is what UNESCO says. A common bias of digital catastrophism is that mistakes the way some people with problems use technology, for example, people suffering from anxiety or depression, confuse or mistakes the way some people with problems use technology with the causes of those problems. It's a very, very common bias. Digital technology is already part of our lives and our social relationships. So we tend to analyze our conflicts by focusing on that technological dimension. The reason is probably that it is a novel, prominent variable, and we have many expert diagnoses about it. Of course, I want to be clear on this point. There is nothing wrong about investigating, for example, how social media affect school bullying, but we risk of creating a digital smoke screen that prevent us from asking why our schools are so prone to bullying, with smartphones or without smartphones. Thinking that we can overcome our social problems with more technology is as naive as believing that we can do so by suppressing access to technology. The technological moral panic is a kind of negative form of cyber fetishism. It is the illiberal conservative side of digital solutionism. For many years, the Californian ideology spread a friendly and progressive version of neoliberal globalization. For orthodox economics, and the free market reaches optimal equilibrium points without the need for economic planning or government intervention. For cyber utopism, the architecture of the internet gives rise to a kind of digital invisible hand, a global system of cooperation that arises automatically from uncoordinated interaction. This cyber utopia has not survived the contemporary polycrisis, economic crisis, pandemic, political crisis, democratic crisis. But in this context, cyber utopia has not just collapsed. Instead, it has been transformed into a technological dystopia that retains many traits of the precedent system. I think today we look at the internet and social media with fear and distrust as a dangerous Hobbesian jungle full of violence, full of scams and lies. We see internet as a digital battlefield in which only a few corporations have the monopolistic power. This is the digital equivalent of a private army to survive. I mean, the centrality of tech corporation in global capitalism is beyond doubt, but they are no longer able to soften the neoliberal project or offer an alternative to its degradation. On the contrary, they amplify problems like precarious work or market concentration. At the beginning of 21st century, the network society was our great hope for democracy and equality. Today, we are in another place, in another moment. No? We consider the network society as the perfect habitat, the perfect milieu for some of the biggest oligopolies in history. Digital mega companies that no government is able to control. This shift, this very big shift, does not change our technological fetishism. That is my point. We still see digitalization as a kind of geological event, as a kind of meteorological event, over which we have no political influence. We still see the internet and social media as a realm completely closed to democratic deliberation, completely closed to political regulation. Yesterday, some years ago, we used to think that politics have no role to play in a self-regulating digital ecosystem. Today is a little the same, because we think that the digital Leviathan is deaf to our political voices. But at the end of the day, the outcome is very similar. We are living the doppelganger, the double, the sinister double, the dark double of digital utopia. 20 years ago, I can't remember that, we were asked to surf the great digital wave that would propel us to free and innovative territories. Today, we are encouraged to build digital bunkers, digital bunkers, to protect us from this tsunami of hate, or this tsunami of fake news, this tsunami of manipulation. But again, the underlying moral is very similar. Emancipatory technopolitics is impossible. The democratization of digital culture is an oxymoron, I mean a contradiction. Digital solutionism has become an ally of the conservative politics, an ally of the radical right. So I see the Spanish mobilization to protect children from digital dangers as a good example of this shift. Repression, control, fear seem the only options in a terrifying digital world. The moral is, we can't change technology, we can't change the uses of technology, so we just need digital prohibition, because that's all we can do. I'm going to say something a little private. At a recent meeting, I heard a Spanish privacy expert praising the legislation of a country that, in his opinion, has effective laws to protect children on the internet. That country was not France, was not USA, was not Sweden. That country was China. China. I mean, today authoritarian leaders present themselves as an alternative to the failure of liberal cosmopolitanism in a conflictive and scaling world. Losing freedom, losing tolerance seems the price to pay for protecting us against the alleged global dangers. Digital platforms are the digital version of this new authoritarianism. The platform also demands that we sacrifice our civil and labor rights, our privacy, our democratic sovereignty. It offers us, in return, some control over the risks that, in fact, they themselves create. It is a kind of mafia-like protection, because they create the danger, they offer the protection against that danger. Our social media are much more sweet to an authoritarian agenda than to a democratic project. You only need to spend an hour a day on Twitter, for example, to convince millions and millions of people that the earth is flat, or that Hillary Clinton was involved in satanic rites in a Washington pizzeria, or crazy things like that. But it takes years and years of activism, years and years of work to convince people that the boss who exploits them is in fact an exploiter. So there is a big asymmetry. Our social media are much more sweet to an authoritarian agenda than to a democratic project. That's my point. Perhaps the most striking thing is how predictable has been this shift from utopia to technological dystopia. This situation of collective powerlessness and digital dependence has become too familiar. The reason, at least in part, is from my point of view, is the death of the free culture movement, the shift from digital solutionism to digital moral panic, kill copyleft, kill digital collaboration, kill media antagonism, kill communication guerrilla, and so on and so on. Of course, there is still many people all over the world who collaborate on the networks, who use copyleft, who organize hack labs and fight against digital enclosures. But sadly, their presence in public sphere is anecdotal. The library of Digital Alexandria has already burned, and no one seems to care about it. Let me conclude by coming back to the beginning of my presentation. I can understand, I have 3 children, so I can understand that families who are concerned about their children's use of digital device, screen time, and toxic technological practice. I can understand it perfectly. But as in many other areas of our societies, the collapse of the neoliberal agenda has left the field free for the authoritarian political waves. people concerned about the problems of digitalization hardly find voices offering convincing alternatives to digital authoritarianism. That is the reason we let ourselves be fooled by restrictive laws, megalomaniac super rich, crazy influencers, all of them promising to guide and to protect us in this digital jungle. For this reason, I think it is urgent that we recover the free culture movement, the free culture program. I know today it sounds like ancient history, but not so long ago, some people dreamed about a free digital culture. They imagine a digital public sphere subject to a democratic deliberation. They thought that what happened on our screens and what happened in real life was connected in a more complex way than the digital solutionism believed. And I think that first, digital privatization gives enormous power to large corporations, while on the other hand, prevent us from discover the social reach, the social possibilities of these technologies. Because in fact, we have in our pockets computers more powerful than those used by NASA to travel to the moon, but we use them to share cute cat videos. It's absurd. Second, the free culture movement posed that the discovery of those possibilities blocked by privatization can be part of a broader project of political change. The struggle for a more just and egalitarian society can also create the conditions for emancipatory uses of digital technology. I know it was surely a naive project, surely. But at the end of the day, I prefer naivety to accepting that technopolitics is condemned to be complicit in the destruction of democracy. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was very interesting discussion. Actually, as the IR or the political science scholars, most of us, this topic is very wide and sometimes so much detailed for us to follow your conversation. But what is very essential actually in your study for me, we are in a search for understanding what's happening around us today. It's not only related with the interstate relations. We know we started to talk about world politics and interplay of different actors, other actors than states. We know that too, but how to deal with it in this changing world is a new topic of discussion. And there is no answer to that. There are always critics and some questions, but no answers. So when I was looking at your study, your very nicely, let's say, the translated book into Turkish, and it's also existing in English and Spanish. This is the Digital Utopia. So it's talking about actually changing nature of politics and society. So we need to talk again the role of individual, role of society, individual relationship, and how we should create a kind of political discussion to discuss about a proper and good order for everybody. So from that aspect, what you presented us really valuable. Yes, we are going a little bit back to our, let's say, the discussion much deeper, much the roots for our understanding. But from another aspect, it's really important. Maybe I can ask a question to continue our discussion, if you permit me. So when you look around us, what's continuing and what's changing in politics according to you, and um, how we can understand this new dynamics according to this, the impact of this, let's say the digital transformation, and what kind of impact it create on international politics. Actually, you referred briefly about these issues by showing this nice photo of Trump. It's waiting for us as an interesting thread. But if you expand a little bit more, that can be interesting.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a very important question. Well, I do my best because it's very difficult. I believe that the first great political change of our time is the systemic crisis of neoliberalism, which surely began with the Great Recession of 2006 or 2008. Of course, global elites are increasing their power. Of course, privatizations are still underway. But I think now neoliberalism is openly present as a partisan agenda, with which global ruling classes try to maintain their position of privilege, and to which people have to submit in the absence of alternatives or realistic alternatives. But no one pretends anymore that economic orthodoxy is part of a universalist project, as in the 90s. No one pretends anymore that economic orthodoxy is a positive strategy for humanity as a whole. Neoliberalism has become free economics, a symptom of political decomposition, as in Argentina, or is the perfect example for me. It is a situation in El Salvador. Argentina is El Salvador, I think, good examples of this. It is a situation, in some respects, very similar to that of the interwar time, at least as it was analyzed by Karl Polanyi, because we are seeing how the breakdown of the free market fantasy brings a return of the politics. But that return of the politics can be either progressive or authoritarian, as in the 30s of the last century, of the former century. The difference with the interwar time and our time is, and this is the second great discontinuity for me, is the ecological crisis. What Naomi Klein said, changes everything. The crisis of neoliberalism, because the crisis of neoliberalism, I think, has been seen as an opportunity by different political forces, by different political actors, both progressive and conservative. However, unlike other historical moments, these different positions, conservative and progressive, face completely asymmetrical challenges, because, well, I mean, a part of obviously of their different relationship to the interest of economic and social needs, because the ecological crisis affect progressive and authoritarian programs in opposite ways. I mean, for regressive authoritarian movements, the global economic crisis is a comfortable as seen comfortable scenario because competition for natural resources fits the nationalism closure against the external enemy, justify repressive internal politics, and so on and so on. Instead, for progressive movements, the eco-social crisis means a labyrinth, a puzzle, enormous. It means a big transformation of progressive political agenda. For example, for eco-socialism, can no longer promise to universalize capitalist abundance. It's impossible. It's the eco-socialist program is now much darker. It's something like to build an egalitarian austerity, some austerity fair and compatible with freedom, something like that. It's not the old program of abundance, of socialist abundance. It's another thing, much complex, much darker. And such a scenario poses enormous problems for grassroots politics, because since 2008, in many countries, there have been large social mobilizations, a lot of countries. In some places, as in Chile, for example, they have led to great political changes. The problem faced by these mobilizations, for me, from my point of view, is that destituent power does not automatically conduce to constructive constituent processes, constructive processes. Grassroots mobilizations is sometimes, for example, in Spain, is a very good example, is sometimes very intense, but short-lived. What is often lacking are stable organizations capable of sustaining lasting action, demanding an ambitious program from a government, and defending too that government from the attacks it will surely receive. I think the underlying, I'm going to finish with this, I think the underlying reason is, as you said, that neoliberalism has produced very individualistic societies in which the great grassroots organizations as unions have been very weakened. Destroying solidarity, this is the moral, destroying solidarity is easy, it's very easy. It's easy and fast. You can do it in just a few months, in a few years. Building organization, building institution is very, very slow. It's very difficult. Sometimes it takes generations. So there is a symmetry complicated though.
Okay, it's interesting. And maybe I should ask as a continuation of my question, yes, the neoliberal order and this, the global elites and the settled international and also the national. So we have also problem to divide them today. So we have a very interesting case as an international event, Gaza situation, and people are getting together by using this digital, let's say, the means of communication, and especially watching all this massacre in front of us by using these devices creates another situation. It's a kind of shock wave. It shaked the people, and somehow it broke up some, let's say, the ideological, especially the right-wing division. So it's so interesting. So we are witnessing actually an international transformation era, according to me. So would you like to say a few words about this issue also? What
Yeah.
kind of things you see when you look at this Gaza event and how people respond, how it's connected with this, the changing politics with the influence of digital world?
Well, it's a great issue again. Um, I have not the answer. I have some doubts. But for me, the question um, of political change linked to the digital world has less to do with communication than with hegemony in grand terms. They are related issues, but they are not exactly the same thing. Hegemony, communication. The concept of hegemony is an attempt to find an alternative to the perspective of liberal political tradition, which understands political activity as a transparent and intentional process. But to the materialist political positions, which instead talk about the role of economic structures and disregard the role of political communication. It's like a third way between those opposite traditions. And we know that objective information like scientific data have very little impact in mobilization. Um, for the theory of hegemony, ideology has less to do with coherent ideas or coherent discourses than with ways of life, sensibility, affections. Theories of hegemony tell us that what matters is not what people think, but exactly, but how those beliefs are integrated in complex ways into their everyday life, into their everyday practice. For example, it is perfectly possible uh, to have an accurate ecological information, share progressive values, and yet live a life of ecological destruction. I think this is actually an accurate description, an accurate portrait of almost any left-wing person living in a rich country. So for a long time, a very naive view of the political effect of digital technology was spread. And that naive view posed that the access to unlimited sources of information would make us more rational, more cosmopolitan, and open to rational debate and democracy. We know that's not the case. We know that's not the case. The internet has even more bias, noise, and echo chambers than traditional media. And I think the radical right has understood this very well. Truth, information, honest communication is not very important to build a counter power. Often, fake news is much more effective than the truth. It's sad, but it is so. Because politics is about power, not about being right. But the question for me, the question you posed for me remains, how do you build hegemony in a digital environment from a democratic and egalitarian point of view? Is it possible? I think it is. I think it is. But my opinion is that technology in itself is not so important, or better sense. It will be more or less important to the extent that it accompanies other social movements, other social forces. That is what we have been these years in Gaza too. I think we have to change our outlook because technology alone has not the power for social change. But when progressive social changes take place, we discover uses for technology that we never even imagined. It's a very different. That's my point of view.
No, it was very understandable because yes, we are feeling the same. So many people are sharing the same feelings and other emotions. But so what? So we can see that actually the politics needs its own essence for the organization coming together, the social forces. So socializations is still at the core of this, the political consideration. So the question is how to create this in this changing world. Maybe nobody has clear one statement for this question, but it was very interesting conversation. But what I was feeling for myself when I was listening to you, I need to read your book again in detail to follow this discussion much more. It's a very good book. I advise all our followers to read this book. It is also translated into Turkish from İletişim Yayınları. It's published newly, so you can buy and read. It's a very good book. I hope to host you again in our next programs, especially for our closed workshop for the academicians, because we have so many discussions among us to discuss changing nature of politics and what we can write, how we can analyze all these changes. So I'm sure your contribution will be great. It was wonderful. So you have a muchas gracias here from Didem Buhari from İzmir, a nice city of Turkey. We hope to host you in person in the next events. It was wonderful. Thanks for all the participants. So see you in our next programs, hopefully. Thanks again for your valuable contribution, dear Professor Cesar Rendueles.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.